Okay guys, thank you so much for your help over in the Facebook group with voting for left or right picture. There is a method behind this. I'm going to try and explain it all right now. There's a lot of thoughts going through my head. I'll try and make it as simple as possible. But basically we have, if you saw in the comments and kind of looked at some of my replies, the left is from a RAW file that is edited, starting from a preset. It's outbound 1. I did have to lessen the contrast and lift the shadows because I kind of lost all of the right side of the face here, Kirby's left side. The right is actually just a JPEG file straight out of camera. When you compare it then, you kind of want it to have a little bit more contrast, but I will tell you that the reason that this started, it goes back to last Saturday, when I basically posted a video, and I don't know how many of you saw that, because if you post a YouTube video on Facebook, it doesn't push it at all. It just pushes it way down to the bottom of the feed. So a lot of you might have missed that. But I was talking about why people love Canon colors. I think one theory anyway is because of how it handles JPEGs. It is phenomenal. And so realize that if you're only shooting in RAW, the image that you see on the back of the screen is a JPEG. And now that gets embedded as a sidecar file to where when you pull it up in Lightroom, you see that JPEG preview even if you didn't record into JPEG. And I have confirmed, that's why I did all these pictures down here to go over to Lightroom. I have confirmed that if you capture in JPEG, so like for example, this is RAW, and you can see it's embedded the sidecar file for the preview. This is JPEG. So I've confirmed that the JPEG, if you record in JPEG, and the sidecar preview are exactly the same. So that got me thinking, man, it gets me thinking about shooting in JPEG, especially for personal stuff around the home. Then I even thought like perhaps even more so, because as I point out in the last video, I can go in and edit a RAW file for 20 minutes to make it just like look completely neutral and natural, like a good starting point like these JPEGs are, and it's just, I can't get it. It's good. Canon is doing something, and it's different every picture, to where it puts in its little magic Canon sauce, and it's just a beautiful image straight out of camera, but only for JPEG. I mean, look at this picture when we go to develop, and this was my point on the last one. You can see just the RAW file is completely different than the JPEG. I mean, this is the same file. One is RAW, one is JPEG. And so I kind of went through all that in the last one, and I'm gonna leave that one there. But the biggest point here is that it gets me thinking about shooting in RAW plus JPEG, because my workflow for all the personal family stuff could basically just be upload straight to Google Photos, the JPEG. Now, I realized that in the comments, I ended up going and putting a little bit more contrast on this, so I did a follow-up post where I basically just added an S-curve and maybe a tiny bit of vibrance. So let me go actually to this here. Yes, a tiny S-curve, and the shadows didn't go too deep, and then vibrance, and that is it. No sharpening, no nothing, because Canon's already done that with the JPEG, and as you can see, it is like so sharp. But to me, just as like the tones here and it being such a natural look is just hard to get to when you develop it from hand. I'm just gonna say that. So when you go to develop stuff with RAW, you're usually gonna start with a preset, and I went through these, and maybe I should have done like outbound 3 stuff, but I went with outbound 1. But then, of course, I need to raise exposure, and then I'm like, it's still too dark back here, so I still kind of lifted the shadows. I lifted the blacks a little bit. You know what? I might have even bumped down the contrast a tiny bit. My point is that you're still messing with the image to get it to there, and that's precious time. Now I could copy all that. With JPEG, if I wanted a little bit more contrast, all I have to do is import it with a slight contrast curve, period, done. Then I'd have to export it as JPEG. But I'm telling you, when I first saw these images like straight out of camera, and right when I imported into Lightroom, my first instinct with the JPEGs is I don't need to edit that. I don't want to edit that. It is just a great standard picture without any stylization. And of course, comparison is the thief of joy. When you compare it to the contrast and the color of a stylized preset like Outbound or any of your presets, now all of a sudden you want a little bit more contrast. But going with the first instinct, I would be totally fine having all of these files that I shoot of personal stuff as JPEGs right up on Google Photos. And then if I needed to add style, where do we do that? We do that in Instagram right before we post, right? A lot of times, even if we edit, I still would put like a little bit. So that has me thinking about that. Now I know that the question that comes up, like, oh, so going to shoot Canon or we're going to shoot Sony? And someone asked me, after all this, are you still preferring Sony or Canon or what is it now? And I said, I prefer Sony for some things and Canon for other things. But I will say that this is one consideration that I'd have if I owned a Canon body, is that the workflow of personal shooting, just family memory stuff, improves drastically because I would capture all that stuff in JPEG and just put it up there. And if I want to share to Instagram or something with a little bit more style, I just put that stylized stuff on basically a perfect JPEG starting point. Guys, this is auto white balance. By the way, there is no auto lighting optimizer on. That was asked in the last YouTube video that I'm sure a lot of you missed. It is set to off. Canon is just doing this special Canon thing to the JPEGs to make it look really good compared to the RAW file. For client stuff, yeah, you gotta shoot in RAW, for sure. And I probably would still shoot like even the family stuff in RAW, that way I just have it in case I capture an unbelievable pic that I wanted to edit and give a little bit of extra TLC to. So one question that goes from here is, what about these presets on the JPEG? And I have done that, and I can tell you that presets are dialed in for those RAW files that start out flat and a lot of times darker. I have applied, for example, let me show you that real quick. Why not, right? So let's go here. You see Outbound 1 with a few changes on the RAW. If I did the same thing, I'll just copy all these and then let me go to the JPEG here and paste it. You can see it's all whacked out. Now, is that just contrast or just brightness? No, if I come down here, you can see it is, it just kind of gets crazy a little bit everywhere. And so if you're gonna do a preset from like any that you've bought, those are tuned for RAW for sure. It would be one thing to start some presets for JPEG shooting, but now I'm getting way out there. I'm just going to leave it at that for now, guys. I realize that there's a lot of other stuff you might be asking yourself in my head right now, and I know that a lot of people are very interested in Canon R5 versus R6 versus Sony A7 III. I do have all that stuff in my head, and I have some of it recorded, and there's a lot of videos to come for that. I just need a little bit of time because I'm trying to do tutorials for some other stuff this month and for some of the teen stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I will get to it. It is interesting discussion. I'll probably have to break it up into segments unless we want to have a Zoom meeting sometime and block out an hour, and I just want to get it all out on the table and we all want to deal with the mess together. I'm totally up to doing that if we want to. But for now, I'll try and kind of segment some of that comparison stuff into different topics, different little sub-discussions to keep it a little bit more clean. But yeah, for now, this was an interesting experiment. Thanks again for helping me have it. It's fun. All right, guys, God bless.